To end the war, she chose to marry a human, then saw him single-handedly crush entire armies. Princess Lyra stood on the balcony of the high tower, looking out over the spired city of Vantaris. The morning sky was painted with streaks of pale green and violet, a beauty that had once been a comfort to her. Today, however, it offered little solace. Her people were restless, fearful, and weary from decades of war with the humans, a race thought to be cunning and ruthless. Lyra herself felt the weight of the crown heavier than ever. The war had claimed countless lives on both sides, and yet no truce had ever lasted more than a few months. Her advisors had gathered below in the council chamber, voices tense with urgency. The war was at a stalemate, and the Alari could no longer sustain such losses. Lyra had spent countless nights poring over maps, military reports, and intelligence briefings. Every strategy had been considered, every potential alliance weighed. And now a decision had come to her that no princess should ever have to make. To end the war, she would marry a human. The proposal was not born from love or desire. It was born from necessity. The humans respected strength, courage, and intelligence above all, and their leaders would not negotiate peace unless a gesture of commitment was made. A marriage, Lyra knew, was more than a political move. It was a pledge that would force both sides to stop the bloodshed. And yet the thought of aligning herself with the enemy left her stomach churning with unease. Her mind was made up, but her heart struggled with the unknown. She had never met the human chosen for this alliance, Commander Kale. Rumors described him as fearless, brilliant, and relentless in battle. Some whispered that he was almost superhuman in his ability to think ahead, to anticipate enemy movements before they happened. Lyra did not doubt his capabilities, but she wondered what kind of man could command such fear and respect from his own people while still facing centuries of alien hatred without flinching. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. A messenger had arrived, carrying a sealed communique from Kale himself. Lyra's fingers trembled slightly as she broke the seal and read the words. They were polite, formal, yet carried a quiet confidence that made her heart beat faster. He accepted the marriage proposal, understanding its gravity, and expressed a desire to meet her in person before the alliance was finalized. The council urged her to delay the meeting, warning of the danger of a human's presence in the capital. Rogue factions of the Alari still opposed peace and could see the marriage as betrayal. But Lyra was resolute. If this union was to succeed, she needed to see the man who could end the war with his mind, and perhaps, as she feared, with his strength. When Kale arrived, the city was on edge. His ship descended smoothly into the central plaza, its sleek metallic hull reflecting the twin suns above. Citizens paused to watch the human step onto the platform, his uniform simple but impeccably maintained. Unlike the stories of ruthless generals, Kale did not stride with arrogance or display overt aggression. His eyes were sharp, observant, but not cold. They held a quiet intensity, as if he measured every detail before acting. Lyra approached him with measured steps, her heart hammering in her chest. She expected fear, doubt, or perhaps disdain from this human who had been trained to see aliens as enemies. Instead, Kale bowed slightly, a gesture that conveyed respect without weakness. His voice, calm and steady, carried across the plaza. "Princess Lyra," he said, "I understand the importance of this meeting. I am here to offer not just my hand, but my commitment to peace." His words, simple as they were, carried weight. Lyra found herself surprised by the honesty in his tone. There was no hint of manipulation, no attempt to intimidate. He spoke like a leader, yet not like a conqueror. The days that followed were filled with cautious interactions. Kale observed the city, met with Lyra's advisors, and attended strategy sessions. Every decision he made was deliberate, measured, and insightful. He challenged assumptions not with arrogance, but with reasoning that forced even the most experienced generals to reconsider their plans. Lyra found herself drawn to his mind, fascinated by the way he saw patterns others missed, anticipated moves before they happened, and always kept the greater good in focus. Yet the princess knew that words alone would not prove the human's worth. The war was not over, and threats still lingered. Intelligence reports came in of rogue Alari factions attacking human supply lines, desperate to sabotage the fragile alliance. Lyra could not afford to sit idly while her people were endangered. She needed to see Kale's abilities firsthand. The first skirmish occurred on the outskirts of Vantaris, where a human convoy transporting critical supplies was ambushed by a band of rogue Elari raiders. Kale personally led a small contingent to defend the convoy, and Lyra watched from the city's observation tower, her heart pounding. The battle unfolded with terrifying intensity. Kale's approach was unlike anything Lyra had seen in centuries of military campaigns. He moved with precision, directing his forces with clear commands, exploiting weaknesses in the enemy's formation. When a raider unit tried to flank his men, he anticipated it and repositioned his troops before the attack could land. When enemy war machines advanced, he targeted their vulnerabilities with pinpoint accuracy, minimizing casualties. Lyra realized that Kale did not rely on brute force alone. He understood the battlefield as a whole, predicting outcomes and adjusting strategies in real time. The human mind, she saw, was a weapon in itself. By the time the skirmish ended, the raiders were in full retreat. Kale's forces had suffered only minor losses, while the enemy had been decisively repelled. Citizens and soldiers alike whispered in amazement, their fear of humans giving way to a cautious admiration. Lyra, however, felt a mixture of awe and relief. The human she had chosen for this alliance had not only defended her people, but had done so with a skill and courage that inspired confidence. In the quiet moments after the battle, Kale spoke with Lyra privately. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The war is far from over, but it can be ended without needless suffering. We must act decisively together." Lyra nodded, her respect for him growing with every word. She saw not just a commander, but a man committed to protecting life, willing to bear the burden of responsibility for countless souls. In that moment, she understood why the humans had survived as a species despite their apparent disadvantages. Their strength was not only in their technology or numbers, but in their courage, ingenuity, and unwavering resolve. Over the following days, Kale continued to demonstrate his capabilities. He studied Elari battle formations, suggesting improvements that surprised even veteran generals. He met with local leaders, gaining their trust and showing that he valued cooperation over domination. Lyra began to see a vision of peace that had once seemed impossible. Perhaps, she thought, humans were not the enemy her people had believed them to be. Yet challenges remained. Factions within her own court whispered doubts, questioning the wisdom of marrying a human. Some accused her of naivety, claiming that no single human could alter the course of the war. Lyra ignored the murmurs, focusing instead on Kale and what she had witnessed. The proof of his skill was not in promises or speeches, but in action, decisive, intelligent, and fearless action. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet, Lyra and Kale stood together on the balcony of the high tower. The city below was quiet, citizens resting after a day of uneasy peace. Lyra glanced at him, seeing not the enemy commander she had once feared, but a partner, a human whose mind and courage could change the fate of entire worlds. "I did not expect you to be like this," she admitted softly. "I thought humans were different. Dangerous, unpredictable, but I see now that strength comes in many forms." Kale turned to her, his expression unreadable yet calm. "Strength is not always about fighting," he said. "It is about protecting, guiding, and making choices that matter. That is what any leader must do, human or Elari." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of hope she had not felt in years. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but with Kale by her side, she dared to believe that peace was possible. And perhaps, she thought, this alliance would not only end the war, but also show the galaxy the true potential of humanity. As night fell over Vantaris, the princess felt a quiet resolve settle within her. She had chosen a human to save her people, and already she could see the wisdom in her decision. The first step had been taken, and the future, once shrouded in fear and uncertainty, now shimmered with possibility. The stars above the city seemed brighter that night, as if acknowledging the promise of a new era. And somewhere deep within the human commander, Lyra sensed the same determination. Together they would face whatever came next, not as enemies, but as allies and perhaps in time as something more. The war had not yet ended, but for the first time in decades, hope was real. The peace that Lyra and Kale had begun to build was fragile. Word of the human commander's victories had spread quickly, inspiring hope in some, but provoking anger and fear in others. A rogue faction of the Elari, loyal to the old ways of endless war, refused to accept the possibility of a human-Elari alliance. They planned a bold strike, to attack the city of Vantaris itself, aiming to destabilize Lyra's rule and send a message that no human, no matter how skilled, could change the tide of the war. Lyra watched the horizon carefully that morning, her sharp eyes scanning the skies for unusual movement. From her tower, she could see distant clouds of dust, an early warning that the rogue fleet had begun its approach. She turned to Kale, who was already reviewing troop placements and defensive measures with her generals. The human's focus was complete, his mind moving faster than any report could convey. "We can't let them breach the perimeter," Kale said, tracing lines on the holographic map. "They're counting on surprise, on fear. We'll give them neither. Position the interceptor drones along the northern ridge. Keep the artillery ready, but hold fire until they commit. I want them to overextend first." Lyra nodded, impressed by the precision of his orders. Unlike many of her advisors, Kale thought not only in terms of brute force, but in patterns, timing, and human psychology. Every decision seemed to anticipate the enemy's next step. The first wave of ships appeared just as the twin suns reached their zenith. Dozens of sleek, fast vessels swooped toward the city, their engines kicking up streaks of light across the sky. Lyra's heart thumped as the alarm bells rang. Citizens scurried into shelters, soldiers rushed to their stations, and the city's walls shimmered with defensive energy fields. Kale's voice cut through the tension, calm and commanding. "Hold your positions, wait for my signal." The rogue ship struck as predicted, diving toward the perimeter with reckless speed. As they closed in, Kale activated the interceptor drones, which surged forward to intercept the attackers. The drones moved with perfect coordination, blocking the enemy's approach and forcing them to scatter. Artillery units followed Kale's timing, firing in precise volleys that disabled enemy engines without causing unnecessary destruction to the city below. Lyra watched in amazement as Kale moved among his troops. He did not merely give orders, he adjusted them in real time. When an enemy squadron tried to flank the northern wall, Kale anticipated their path and sent reinforcements before the attack could land. When a war machine broke through the outer defenses, Kale personally led a strike team to neutralize it, moving with speed and skill that left even veteran Elari soldiers in awe. The battle raged for hours, but Kale's tactics made every move of the rogue faction predictable. Lyra began to understand what the Elari had never believed possible. A single human mind could outthink entire armies. His strategy combined intelligence, courage, and relentless focus, turning the chaos of battle into an ordered sequence where victory seemed almost inevitable. Despite the intensity of the fighting, Kale maintained a calm demeanor. He never shouted unnecessarily, never panicked, and never allowed fear to cloud his judgment. Soldiers reported that even under heavy fire, he moved with purpose, always 2 steps ahead of the enemy. Lyra, from her vantage point, felt a deep sense of relief. The human she had chosen to ally with was proving that peace could be defended by strength, skill, and intelligence, rather than by mere luck or overwhelming force. By mid-afternoon, the rogue faction began to retreat. Their losses were significant, and the precision of Kale's planning had left them scattered and demoralized. He pursued them only as far as necessary, ensuring that Vantaris was safe but avoiding needless slaughter. Lyra noticed that even in victory, Kale showed restraint. Unlike many warriors she had seen, he did not take pleasure in domination. His goal was protection, not conquest. After the battle, Lyra met Kale at the command center. The room was filled with reports, communications, and tired soldiers, but Kale's focus remained unwavering. He reviewed every movement, every decision, and every result, ensuring that the city's defenses could hold against future attacks. "You've done what I thought impossible," Lyra said quietly. "You've defended Vantaris without losing the city or its people." "I have never seen such skill." Kale shook his head. "Skill is only part of it. Understanding your enemy, predicting their choices, and protecting those who cannot defend themselves, that is what matters. Any commander, Elari or human, would do the same if given the chance." Lyra felt a growing admiration for the human beside her. She realized that his strength was not only physical or tactical, but also moral. He valued life, even in the chaos of war, and sought solutions that minimized suffering. It was a kind of courage that transcended species, one that could unite rather than divide. The city began to rebuild immediately. Citizens repaired damaged streets, replenished supplies, and reinforced defenses. Lyra moved among them, encouraging hope and resilience. She saw in their eyes a renewed faith, not just in her leadership but in the human who had helped protect them. Kale, meanwhile, focused on preparing for the next challenge, analyzing the patterns of the rogue faction and anticipating their possible moves. In the quiet of the evening, Lyra and Kale walked together along the outer walls. The sky was painted in deep oranges and purples, and the city glowed with lights from the restored energy fields. For a brief moment, the war seemed distant, and the human's presence beside her felt less like a political necessity and more like a shield of hope. "You moved like no one I have ever seen," Lyra said softly. "I have studied generations of Elari warriors, yet you anticipate every move before it happens." "How?" Kale smiled faintly. "I have learned to observe, to understand patterns. Battles are like puzzles, pieces that shift and change. If you can see the whole, not just one part, you can predict what comes next. It is not magic. It is preparation and focus." Lyra considered his words. Humans, she realized, had a kind of resilience that even the Elari had underestimated. They were adaptable, quick-thinking, and capable of courage that inspired others to rise above fear. She began to see the true meaning of the legends she had heard. Humans, though young in the galaxy, had a power that went far beyond their size or numbers. The following days brought more challenges. Scouts reported movements of enemy forces near neighboring systems, attempting to exploit the temporary vulnerability created by the battle at Vantaris. Kale coordinated rapid response teams, setting traps, and securing key positions before the enemy could strike. Each maneuver further proved his skill and foresight. Lyra watched in amazement as a single human mind reshaped the battlefield across multiple worlds, turning potential defeat into decisive advantage. Meanwhile, the rogue faction's failure sparked debates among Elari leaders. Many began to reconsider their stance on the human alliance. If one human could accomplish what generations of Elari warriors could not, perhaps there was wisdom in peace, perhaps there was value in cooperation rather than conflict. Lyra noticed the shift, understanding that Kale's influence extended beyond mere tactics. It inspired change in perception, challenging long-held prejudices. One night, as Lyra retired to her private chambers, she reflected on the events of the past week. The city was safe, her people were beginning to rebuild, and Kale had proven himself not only capable but extraordinary. She felt a mixture of awe, relief, and curiosity. Could one human truly change the course of history? She no longer doubted it. Kale, meanwhile, remained in the command center, poring over reports and maps. He moved with relentless focus, analyzing enemy movements, predicting potential attacks, and preparing contingencies. Lyra could see that his mind never rested, that every action was calculated to protect lives and achieve lasting results. It was a dedication that inspired loyalty, trust, and, for Lyra, a growing sense of admiration. The next morning brought news that the rogue faction was attempting another strike, this time targeting a supply station on a nearby moon. Kale immediately mobilized forces, coordinating with local commanders to intercept the attack. Once again, his strategy was flawless. He anticipated enemy maneuvers, outmaneuvered their ships, and ensured that the supply station remained intact. By the end of the second week, the rogue faction had been forced into retreat, their efforts to disrupt the fragile alliance failing repeatedly. Lyra observed the changes in her own people. Fear was giving way to confidence, despair to hope. And she realized that much of this shift was because of one human, a man who fought not for glory or conquest, but for protection, strategy, and the promise of peace. As the sun set once more over Vantaris, Lyra and Kale stood together on the balcony of the high tower. The city below shimmered with life, energy fields humming softly as repairs continued. Lyra looked at Kale, feeling a quiet sense of gratitude and trust. She had chosen him not out of affection, but out of necessity, yet now she could see the wisdom of that choice. The human beside her was not just a commander. He was a force for hope, a symbol of what could be achieved when courage and intelligence met. Kale turned to her, his expression calm yet serious. "The war is not over," he said. "But every day we make it more winnable. Every decision we make now affects the future of countless lives. We must remain vigilant, but we can achieve peace if we stay focused." Lyra nodded, feeling a sense of resolve she had not known in years. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, and perhaps they would finally show the galaxy that humans were not to be feared but respected. The seeds of change had been planted, and with Kale's guidance, the possibility of lasting peace began to bloom. The stars above the city seemed brighter that night, as if acknowledging the courage and intelligence that had already altered the course of the war. Lyra knew that this was only the beginning, and that even greater challenges awaited. But with Kale beside her, she dared to believe that the impossible could be achieved. Hope had returned to Vantaris, and with it, the promise of a future shaped not by hatred or fear, but by the strength, courage, and wisdom of a human commander who had proven that even one person could change the fate of worlds. The morning fog hung low over the plains of Varanth, the site chosen by the rogue faction for their next large-scale assault. From a distance, the ragged forces could be seen gathering, war machines glinting under the twin suns, soldiers moving in coordinated chaos. Lyra stood at the edge of the observation deck aboard Kale's command ship, her gaze fixed on the battlefield. The tension in her chest was undeniable. This would be the largest engagement yet, and the fate of Vantaris and its people could hinge on a single misstep. Kale stood beside her, calm as ever, studying the holographic map projected before them. His fingers traced lines along the enemy formations, noting their numbers, positioning, and probable attack strategies. Unlike her advisors, who fretted over the size of the enemy force, Kale's mind did not panic. He calculated, anticipated, and considered possibilities with a precision that left Lyra both awed and reassured. "They have nearly triple our numbers," one of her generals said, voice tight with concern. "Even with our defenses, the outcome looks grim." Kale did not turn to answer immediately. He continued analyzing the formations, shifting units, and marking key points for interception. "Numbers alone do not win battles," he said finally, his voice calm and firm. "They underestimate our coordination and our ability to predict their moves. We will not fight blindly. We will use their confidence against them." Lyra felt a shiver of hope. She had witnessed Kale's abilities in smaller skirmishes, but now she saw the full scale of his strategic mind. This was not simply bravery in battle. It was an understanding of war that went beyond instinct, a human mind calculating and commanding with clarity few had ever seen. The first wave of enemy forces advanced as predicted. Massive war machines roared across the plains, leaving trails of dust and destruction. Soldiers rushed forward, shouting orders in unison, but Kale had anticipated every movement. He deployed his forces in staggered positions, using natural terrain to create choke points, forcing the enemy into predictable paths. Energy barriers shimmered into place, blocking key approaches while leaving traps in less defended areas, designed to lure the attackers into disadvantageous positions. Lyra watched, her breath caught, as the first clash unfolded. Enemy machines moved confidently, expecting minimal resistance. Then, at Kale's precise command, hidden batteries fired, striking critical systems in the war machines. Explosions erupted in a controlled pattern, creating panic among the attacking soldiers. Kale's troops moved swiftly, exploiting the chaos with unmatched coordination. When a squadron of enemy flyers attempted a sudden flank, Kale anticipated their approach. He personally directed anti-air units to intercept, moving in real time to adjust for changes in speed and trajectory. The flyers faltered under the unexpected resistance, some retreating, others crashing into the open plains. Lyra could hardly believe her eyes. One human mind was turning what should have been a hopeless battle into a series of carefully orchestrated victories. She had known humans were clever and resilient, but seeing Kale in action at this scale was unlike anything she had imagined. Every move, every command, every decision seemed perfectly timed to maximize impact while minimizing loss of life. Hours passed, and the battlefield became a controlled chaos under Kale's leadership. Rogue forces attacked relentlessly, but each move was met with a counter that seemed almost preordained. Soldiers under Kale's command trusted him implicitly, moving as if guided by instinct. Even the Elari generals, initially skeptical of a human's abilities, were forced to acknowledge the brilliance of his strategy. At one critical moment, the enemy concentrated their forces on a vulnerable ridge, hoping to break the line. Kale anticipated this and had already prepared an ambush. Hidden squads emerged from the terrain, surrounding the rogue units. Artillery and drone units struck simultaneously, disabling the enemy's command machinery. The ridge, once a potential disaster, became a trap that turned the tide of the battle. Lyra felt a surge of admiration and awe. She had never seen such precision in warfare. Cale's tactics were flawless, his intuition almost supernatural. And yet he remained humble, never letting pride or anger dictate his actions. His focus was on results, on protecting lives, on achieving peace. The rogue faction, realizing their plans had been anticipated at every turn, began to retreat in disarray. But Cale was not finished. He led a controlled pursuit, cutting off escape routes and forcing the enemy into surrender without unnecessary slaughter. By nightfall, the battlefield was cleared, the rogue forces scattered, and the threat to Vantaris neutralized, all through the leadership of a single human commander. Lyra walked among the troops after the battle, observing the aftermath. Soldiers were exhausted but alive. The terrain bore scars from the machines and energy blasts, but the human and Elari forces had suffered minimal casualties. Lyra approached Cale, who was reviewing data from the engagement, noting enemy positions and losses. "You did it," she said quietly, awe in her voice. "I cannot believe one human could command so much, think so clearly, and save so many lives." Cale looked up briefly, eyes calm. "It is not about one human," he replied. "It is about preparation, understanding, and using every advantage wisely. Any leader can do this with the right information and the right choices. But in war, hesitation can cost thousands of lives. We act decisively, or we fail." Lyra studied him, realizing that the calm, collected demeanor she saw was not arrogance but discipline. Cale's strength was not only in his mind, but in his ability to inspire confidence. Soldiers followed him without fear because they trusted his judgment. That trust, Lyra understood, was as powerful as any weapon. In the days following the battle, Cale worked tirelessly to secure the region. He organized supply lines, repaired defenses, and ensured that the rogue faction could not regroup. His efforts transformed the morale of both humans and Elari soldiers. Where fear had once dominated, now confidence and hope prevailed. Lyra began to notice subtle changes among her people. Citizens who had been skeptical of the human alliance were now curious, even respectful. They spoke in quiet tones of Cale's leadership, marveling at his courage and skill. Young Elari warriors began to train differently, inspired by the human strategies and methods. It was as if Cale had not only won a battle but had changed the mindset of an entire species. One evening, after another day of reviewing reports and planning future defenses, Cale joined Lyra on the balcony of the command ship. The stars above were bright, scattered across the sky like diamonds on black silk. The city of Vantaris glowed faintly below, peaceful once more, though scars of the recent battle remained. "You have done more than anyone could have imagined," Lyra said softly. "You've protected my people, inspired my soldiers, and shown me that humans are more than I ever believed." Cale's expression remained calm, yet a faint smile touched his lips. "I am glad to serve. The goal is peace, not glory. If my actions can protect lives and end this war, then that is enough. Humans have always believed in resilience, in thinking through challenges, in acting when others hesitate. That is all I do, act when it matters most." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of trust and admiration. She understood now why she had chosen him. It was not just his skill in battle or his intelligence that made him remarkable. It was his dedication, his courage, and his unwavering focus on what truly mattered, saving lives and ending suffering. Over the following weeks, Cale continued to anticipate enemy moves, securing key systems and preventing further rogue attacks. Each engagement reinforced the truth that humans, though often underestimated, could rival the most disciplined Elari forces. Lyra began to see him not only as an ally, but as a symbol, a proof that courage, intelligence, and determination could transcend species and change the course of history. Her thoughts often returned to the earlier days of uncertainty, when she had feared aligning with a human. Those fears now seemed distant, replaced by respect and hope. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Lyra believed that victory could be achieved with minimal loss, and perhaps even peace could endure. One morning, a messenger arrived with intelligence that another rogue faction was mobilizing on a distant moon. Cale's eyes narrowed as he studied the report. "They will attempt the same mistakes," he said. They will underestimate coordination, underestimate strategy, and underestimate the value of life. We will meet them before they reach full strength. Lyra observed as he outlined plans for preemptive strikes, strategic defenses, and protective measures for civilians. Every decision was precise, every move calculated. She realized that Kale's presence had already shifted the balance of the war. Where once the humans and Elari had been locked in endless bloodshed, now cooperation and intelligence allowed victories that would have been impossible before. As the sun set that evening, casting long shadows across the plains, Lyra stood beside Kale once more. "You are unlike anyone I have ever known," she said softly. "Not just in skill, but in purpose. You fight not for pride, not for conquest, but for life itself. That is remarkable." Kale looked at her, eyes calm yet serious. "The greatest strength is protecting others. That is the purpose of every action I take. One person cannot do everything, but one person can change what is possible. That is what humans believe, and now, together, we can show it to the galaxy." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of truth in his words. The war was far from over, yet hope had returned to her people. With Kale by her side, she believed not only in victory but in the possibility of a future where humans and Elari could coexist, united by courage, intelligence, and a shared desire for peace. The stars above Vantaris sparkled, bearing witness to the courage of a human who had single-handedly reshaped the battlefield. Lyra understood that the legend of this human would grow far beyond this world, and that the future of the galaxy might rest in the hands of one who dared to act decisively, with intelligence, honor, and unwavering focus. The horizon burned with light as the rogue faction launched their ultimate offensive. From miles away, the ground trembled under the weight of approaching war machines, and the sky was filled with the distant hum of enemy ships. This was no small skirmish. It was the culmination of years of planning and hatred. They aimed to crush Vantaris once, and for all end to prove that no human could ever rival the Elari. Lyra stood at the edge of the command platform, her heart pounding but her expression calm. Kale moved beside her, eyes scanning the holographic displays, hands tracing lines along the projected map. Every detail mattered. Terrain, enemy movement, energy output, supply lines, morale. Kale's focus was absolute. The calmness in his gaze gave Lyra strength, but even she could not fully comprehend the scale of his strategy. "They've gathered their largest fleet yet," an advisor reported nervously. "We may be outnumbered by 5-1. Even with our defenses, the city could fall." Kale shook his head slightly. "Numbers are not the deciding factor. Coordination, anticipation, and decisive action determine the outcome. We will use their confidence against them. They will overextend themselves, and then we strike." Lyra nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and hope. She had seen Kale's genius in smaller battles, but this was an entire army, a threat that dwarfed anything they had faced before. She trusted him, yet even trust could not erase the tension in her chest. As the first enemy units crested the hills, Kale gave his orders with precision. Units moved as if a single mind guided them. Artillery fired at predicted paths, intercept drones engaged enemy flyers, and infantry took strategic positions along the ridges and valleys. Every action was calculated to force the enemy into predetermined traps. The rogue faction's advance was confident at first. They believed their sheer numbers would overwhelm the city's defenses, but Kale's plan unfolded perfectly. Hidden strike teams emerged, cutting off supply lines. Artillery units struck from unexpected angles. Enemy war machines were disabled before they could engage effectively. Lyra watched in awe as the tide of the battle shifted, seemingly against the laws of probability. When enemy flanks attempted to circle around the defenders, Kale anticipated the move. He ordered energy barriers to seal the valleys, forcing the attackers into kill zones where human and Elari forces were waiting. Soldiers moved with synchronized precision, each action a reflection of Kale's vision. Lyra realized that what they were witnessing was more than strategy. It was a masterful orchestration of chaos into order. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher in the sky. The battlefield was alive with the noise of combat, war machines roaring, energy beams crackling, soldiers shouting commands. Yet through it all, Kale's voice carried calm and authority over the comms. "Hold your ground, predict their next move, focus on their mistakes. We can win this without unnecessary loss." At one point, the enemy concentrated a massive force against the central ridge, hoping to break through the core defense. Lyra's stomach tightened as she watched the enemy surge forward. Kale's eyes narrowed. Divert the drones to intercept, but leave the center clear. Let them advance, they are walking into our trap. Lyra bit her lip, unsure if she could bear to watch, but Kale's timing was perfect. As the rogue forces reached the ridge, hidden teams struck from both sides, encircling the attackers. Artillery fired precise volleys, disabling command units and leaving the enemy in disarray. Those who had thought themselves unstoppable now faced defeat at the hands of a human they had underestimated. Kale did not pause. He moved with a small elite team to engage enemy war machines that had broken through the outer defenses. He personally disabled one massive machine, climbing onto its hull to reach its control interface, while the team provided cover. In minutes, the threat was neutralized and the ridge held firm. Lyra's heart raced as she watched the human act with fearlessness, skill, and precision. By midday, the rogue faction's morale began to crumble. Their carefully coordinated attacks had been anticipated and countered at every turn. Lyra could see panic spreading among their ranks. Units retreated in disorder, commanders shouted in confusion, and the tide of battle had shifted completely. Yet Kale did not relent. He continued to anticipate every move, using the enemy's desperation against them. He positioned squads to cut off escape routes, forcing surrender rather than allowing destruction. He prioritized the protection of civilians and infrastructure, ensuring that the city of Vantaris would survive intact. Lyra realized that Kale's genius was not only in winning battles, but in shaping victories that preserved life and hope. As the sun began to set, the final wave of rogue forces approached. They were desperate, knowing that defeat was inevitable. Kale met them with a combination of tactical brilliance and restraint. Instead of annihilating them entirely, he forced a surrender, capturing enemy leaders and dispersing the remaining troops safely. The battlefield fell silent, the last echoes of war fading into the evening sky. Lyra descended to the field alongside Kale. The aftermath was both devastating and inspiring. Scars of battle marked the terrain, but the human and Elari forces had suffered fewer casualties than expected. Citizens and soldiers alike looked to Kale with awe and gratitude. Even those who had doubted him now recognized that he had not only saved lives, but had fundamentally changed the course of the war. "Kale," Lyra said, her voice carrying across the field, "I never imagined that one human could do what you've done today. Entire armies thought unstoppable have been turned aside by your planning, your courage, and your mind." Kale's expression remained calm. "It is not about being unstoppable. It is about understanding, preparation, and decisive action. Any army can be defeated if you know its strengths and weaknesses. Victory comes to those who anticipate, not just those who strike." Lyra looked around at the exhausted soldiers, the surviving civilians, and the captured rogue leaders. She realized that Kale's victory was not only physical but psychological. He had shown her people that humans were not merely unpredictable or dangerous. They were capable of immense intelligence, courage, and moral strength. The next days were filled with recovery and reorganization. Kale ensured that every captured enemy soldier was treated humanely, that resources were distributed fairly, and that defensive positions were reinforced. Lyra observed how his approach inspired loyalty and respect, not only from humans, but from the Elari as well. It was rare to see a leader whose actions reflected both strength and integrity so completely. One evening, after the field reports had been reviewed and the city stabilized, Lyra and Kale stood on the balcony of the high tower once again. The twin suns had set, leaving the sky a deep purple, dotted with stars. The city glimmered below, repaired and defended, a testament to what they had achieved together. "You have changed everything," Lyra said quietly. "The war, the people, the perception of humans, all of it." Kale looked at her with quiet humility. "Change comes from action, from courage, and from a refusal to accept what seems inevitable. Humans may be young in the galaxy, but we have learned that one person, if determined, can alter the path of history. Today was not about me. It was about what is possible when people act together." Lyra smiled faintly, understanding the truth in his words. She had chosen Kale to end the war, but in the process, he had done something more profound. He had shown her people the power of intelligence, courage, and restraint. He had demonstrated that humans, though underestimated, could rival the greatest civilizations in the galaxy not through destruction, but through strategy, foresight, and moral strength. In the days that followed, the captured rogue leaders were brought to trial. Kale advised Lyra on fair but firm measures, ensuring justice while maintaining the dignity and values of her people. Lyra realized that his vision extended beyond battlefields. It encompassed governance, morality, and diplomacy. His influence was reshaping not only military outcomes, but the future of entire civilizations. As Lyra walked through the city streets, speaking with citizens who had survived the offensive, she saw a new kind of hope. Parents spoke quietly of the human who had saved their children. Soldiers recounted tales of his genius and bravery. Even skeptics acknowledged that Kale had achieved what none had thought possible. That night, Lyra and Kale met privately in her chambers. The city below was quiet, the sounds of reconstruction muted by the darkness. Lyra looked at him, feeling a profound respect that went beyond admiration for skill. She had witnessed not only a brilliant commander, but a man whose values aligned with the protection and preservation of life. "You have done more than end battles," she said softly. "You've inspired my people, shown them a future beyond fear and war." Kale met her gaze calmly. "The future is not guaranteed. It is shaped by those willing to act wisely and courageously. Humans believe in resilience, in thinking through challenges, in choosing action over despair. Today, we have shaped a future where hope can grow. That is the victory I value most." Lyra nodded, feeling a deep sense of trust and partnership. The war was not yet fully over, but the ultimate offensive had been repelled, and the rogue factions had been weakened beyond recovery. She understood now that the marriage alliance with Kale was more than a political necessity. It was a foundation for a lasting peace, built on strength, intelligence, and mutual respect. As the stars glittered above Vantaris, Lyra felt a quiet determination settle within her. The next challenges would come, larger than any before, but she now knew they could be met. With Kale by her side, one human could, indeed, alter the fate of entire civilizations, and perhaps even the galaxy itself. The battlefield had finally fallen silent. The rogue factions were scattered, their leaders captured, and Vantaris stood unharmed, a testament to the combined strength of human and Elari forces under Kale's command. The city was alive again with movement. Citizens rebuilding, soldiers repairing defenses, and leaders meeting to plan the next steps toward lasting peace. Yet despite the calm, Lyra knew that the work had only just begun. The war may have ended in battle, but true peace required more than victories. It demanded diplomacy, trust, and proof that humans and Elari could coexist without fear. Kale walked beside her through the streets, observing the activity around them. His calm presence reassured those nearby, and soldiers straightened instinctively as he passed. Lyra had grown accustomed to the awe and respect he inspired, but she still marveled at it. No human she had ever known carried such influence, and yet Kale remained humble, his focus always on action, not recognition. "Do you think the galaxy will accept peace now?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but tinged with concern. Kale's eyes scanned the horizon, noting repairs and patrols, citizens returning to their routines. "Acceptance will take time. Old fears do not vanish overnight. But today we have shown that humans and Elari can work together, that trust is possible, and that courage and intelligence can overcome prejudice. That is the first step." Lyra nodded. She knew he was right. Even with their victory, the skeptics remained, those who had lived decades of war and carried deep hatred for humans. Convincing them would require more than words. It would require continued proof that humans were not enemies, but allies capable of leadership, fairness, and restraint. In the following days, Kale organized a series of joint human-Elari councils. Leaders from both sides gathered in Vantaris to discuss the future, rebuild alliances, and secure trade and resource agreements. Kale's presence was more than symbolic. He actively contributed to the discussions, offering insights on strategy, governance, and collaboration. His approach was always practical, fair, and grounded in logic, yet carried a deep sense of morality. Lyra observed the interactions carefully. Leaders who had once scoffed at the idea of humans now listened attentively, often deferring to Kale's counsel. His strategies were not merely military. They were solutions to age-old political challenges. He suggested systems for fair resource distribution, shared defense protocols, and coordinated patrols that would ensure rogue factions could not rise again. Every suggestion was grounded in experience, foresight, and a desire to protect life. One day, a group of young Elari warriors approached Kale, hesitant yet curious. "Commander," one said, "how do you do it? How do you think so far ahead, remain calm, and still inspire confidence in everyone?" Kale smiled faintly. "It is about preparation, observation, and respect. Watch carefully, think clearly, and act decisively. Respect your allies, understand your enemies, and value the lives you are responsible for. Courage is nothing without understanding, and strength means little if it harms the innocent. That is all there is to it." The words resonated deeply with Lyra. She had seen Kale's actions on the battlefield, but now she understood the philosophy behind them. He was not merely a brilliant strategist. He was a teacher, a guide, and a symbol of human potential. The young warriors departed inspired, carrying new hope that their own decisions could matter as much as those of the greatest commanders. Lyra found herself increasingly drawn to Kale, not as a political partner, but as a companion she could trust implicitly. She had come to respect him through his skill and courage, and admiration had blossomed into a quiet, unspoken bond. Kale, focused on his duties, seemed unaware of how much he had already inspired her, yet his integrity and decisiveness spoke volumes without words. A ceremony was planned to formalize the peace and the alliance. Lyra would marry Kale not only as a pledge to end the war, but as a symbol of trust between their civilizations. The city of Vantaris was decorated, banners fluttering with the colors of both species, and citizens gathered to witness the event. Kale arrived not with grandeur but with quiet confidence, his presence alone commanding respect. During the ceremony, Lyra addressed the crowd. "Today, we celebrate more than an alliance. We celebrate the courage to overcome fear, the wisdom to recognize strength, and the hope that life can be protected through unity. Our future is not guaranteed, but together, human and Elari, we can shape it for the better." Kale took her hand, his calm gaze meeting hers. "I am honored to stand with you, Princess Lyra, not as a conqueror, but as a partner. Today is not only a promise of peace, it is proof that courage, intelligence, and integrity can change the course of history. Let this union be a symbol of what is possible when we act with purpose and heart." The citizens cheered, and even skeptics could not hide their approval. The marriage was more than ceremony, it was the beginning of a new era. And as Lyra looked at Kale, she felt a sense of certainty she had never known. Humanity, through one exceptional individual, had proven its worth not by domination, but by courage, intelligence, and moral strength. The following weeks were filled with reconstruction, training, and further diplomacy. Kale worked tirelessly to ensure that rogue factions could not rise again, teaching Elari soldiers new strategies and tactics, demonstrating the value of human ingenuity. He collaborated with Lyra to establish programs for cultural exchange, education, and joint defense. Slowly, perceptions began to change. Humans were no longer viewed solely as dangerous outsiders. They were allies, leaders, and protectors. Lyra watched the changes with a growing sense of pride. She had chosen Kale to end the war, but he had done more than that. He had reshaped the hearts and minds of her people, showing them that courage and wisdom could transcend fear and prejudice. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Lyra and Kale stood together on the balcony of the high tower. The stars stretched across the sky, brilliant and calm, and the city below glowed softly with renewed life. "You have done more than I could have imagined," Lyra said. "You have not only defended my people, but shown them hope. You have changed how they see humans, and perhaps the galaxy itself." Kale's expression remained calm, yet there was a faint warmth in his eyes. "I only did what anyone would do if they could. Humans, like all species, have the capacity to shape their world. Today it is through our combined efforts. Tomorrow it is through others who choose courage over fear. That is what matters most." Lyra smiled, understanding the truth in his words. The galaxy had witnessed the power of one human mind and the strength of cooperation. Through Kale, humans had shown their value not by destroying, but by protecting, leading, and inspiring. In the days that followed, the alliance solidified. Trade routes reopened, joint patrols secured critical systems, and former enemies began working together. Kale continued to teach, guide, and inspire, his presence a living testament to the potential of humans. Citizens and soldiers alike came to trust him implicitly, and Lyra's confidence in him never wavered. One morning, Lyra walked through the city streets, observing children playing safely where once danger had loomed, and soldiers training with new techniques Kale had taught them. She realized that the seeds of change had taken root. The war, once endless and devastating, had given way to a chance for growth, unity, and hope. And at the heart of that change stood one human who had proven that courage, intelligence, and moral strength could shape destinies far beyond expectation. At night, Lyra and Kale often spoke of the future. "What comes next?" she asked once, looking out at the peaceful city. Kale's gaze was steady, thoughtful. "The future is shaped by choices. We have ended this war, but challenges will come. Humans, Elari, all civilizations will face trials. The difference now is that we know what is possible when we act wisely and courageously. That is our legacy, and it is something that cannot be undone." Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known. The weight of duty, the fear of loss, and the tension of war had been replaced with hope, understanding, and trust. Kale had not only ended a conflict, but had transformed the hearts of her people and laid the foundation for a brighter future. As the twin suns rose over Vantaris, Lyra reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had chosen a human out of necessity, fearing what might happen, doubting his ability to succeed. Yet Kale had exceeded every expectation. He had not only defended her city and her people, but had inspired change across the galaxy. He had proven that humanity's greatest strength lay not in numbers or technology alone, but in courage, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively and morally. In the quiet of the high tower, Lyra took Kale's hand, feeling the steady strength of his presence. "You have changed everything," she said softly. "Not just for Vantaris, but for all of us." Kale smiled faintly, eyes calm. "And the future is ours to shape. Together we can show the galaxy that courage, wisdom, and respect for life are the true measures of strength. That is the legacy I hope to leave." Lyra nodded, looking out over the city and the horizon beyond. The war had ended, but a new era had begun, an era shaped by a human, guided by courage, intelligence, and moral strength. The galaxy had witnessed a force unlike any other, and in that force, hope had returned. The stars above Vantaris shimmered in acknowledgement, bearing witness to the courage and brilliance that had reshaped the course of history. And Lyra knew with certainty that humanity had proven itself not through domination, but through the power of intellect, bravery, and the unwavering choice to protect life. The alliance was complete, peace was secured, and the story of one extraordinary human would echo across the stars, a testament to the potential of their species, and a promise that courage and wisdom could change even the fate of worlds.